We'll do a review on the Sichas in the Chelek Chav Daled, volume 24. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Devarim. In this Sicha, the Rebbe explains, we find in two places that it's difficult for Hashem what happened, just like the time when the Yidden made the Egel. When they translated the Torah, King Talmai asked them to translate the Torah. So the Gemara says this was a difficult time, as if the day, same as the day when they made the Egel. Rebbe wonders, why is it so terrible? In our parsha, we learned that the translation of the Torah was done, and the extent that you say that it's like making the Egel. And the similar, we find another time the statement, it says that when the students of Beis Shammai overrode and had the majority, and that day it says that Hillel was sitting in front of Shammai like one of the students, because they were the ones that were in the majority and they ruled the halachas. And the Gemara also uses the lashon there that that day was as difficult as the day that the Egel was made. What's the connection and what's the severity to the making of the Egel? The Rebbe will explain first that we're not talking about making the Egel itself. We're talking about the day the Egel was made, not the worship of the Egel. The Rebbe explains that that allowed for mistakes to follow. The concern of the translation into Talmai Hamelech, into Yevonis, into Greek, could lead later on to negativity. The same thing is with Beis Shammai being at that point humbled in front of Beis Shammai could bring in the future negative results, because of people may continue to make the halacha rule like Beis Shammai because of that incident, when that is not true. That was an exception in which Beis Hillel was sitting in front of Beis Shammai like one of the students. And then the Rebbe says, but there's also a deeper idea in the connection over there. Avodah Zorah doesn't really mean literally denying Hashem, but rather a leader. The Yidden wanted a leader. The difference is when Hashem sends Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem speaks through the Kruvim. That is memutzim that come from Hashem, and they're godly and they're connected because they come from Hashem. As opposed to when it comes from Talmai, if it comes from below, then that becomes already a negative, and that's why that's the connection to the Kiyem Shenase Boy Ha'egel. The etzem idea itself, what they wanted was maybe not such a terrible thing, but the way when it came from them and they wanted an entity, somebody separate of Hashem, not a mechaber, but a memutza, somebody intermediary, that was a mistake, and that was the Avodah Zorah. And that's the connection between these items, as the Rebbe will explain inside in the Sikha. But now we'll go step by step. Devarim, Aleph. First, the Rebbe brings down that this is nothing new for the Torah to be translated. We find it in our parsha. We also find it when the Yidden went to the Gilgal over there, it was told to them to translate the Torah. And here we're saying in the Gemara, in the Masechta Sofrim, such a big to-do about that Talmai asked to translate into Greek, and they said it's kosher. Why is that? Aleph. From Pasik be'ever hayardin be'eretz moyav. Oyil Moshe Beir as HaTorah Azois Leimer. on this side, on the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moshe began. Moshe explained this Torah. So what does it mean, Ba'ir? He explained. How did he explain it? Zogner Azal, our sages of blessed memory, say, as b'shivim loshin pirshalahem, that he articulated it for them using all the 70 languages. Valderech zeh, and also similar to this, that Moshe Rabbeinu explained to them on the side of the river, Far Niber gained them Yarden, before they went to the other side of the Jordan, but Moshe ongizogt, so Moshe instructed, as v'hoya ba'ovrechem es hayardin v'goymer, it will be when you pass through the Yarden, etc. V'chos savto al ha'avonim es kol divrei ha'toyra hazois. Then you shall write on these stones the entire words of this Torah. Ba'ir heitev, again, very well explained, articulated well. What does that mean? Well articulated, very good. Well mivur, explained well. Zogun Razal, our sages of blessed memory say, as Ba'ir heitev meant as mizoldo shreiben b'shivim loshen. That explained well means that it should be written in 70 languages. So we see that for the Torah to be written in 70 languages was something which almost seems was a positive thing. This was the Ba'ir Heitav. This was in order to give access to all the nations of the world to 70 Lashon. Doesn't seem like a negative. But yet we learn in Masechta Seifrim, we learn Lenamir, over there we learn Ma'isa Behezikenim, Shekosvu Litalme as a Talme Hamelech as a Torah Yevonis. There was a story. There were 5 elders, 5 sages that had written to King Talmai the Torah in Greek. And it says in Sechta Sofrim, V'hoya ha'yoim Poshel Yisrael kiyem shenase ha'egel. That day was difficult for the Yidden as the day that the Egel was made. And the reason is because the Torah could not sufficiently be translated. So it was difficult. So the Rebbe says, isn't it mubah? It's not understood. The fact from them was Moshe Pirshu Lahem the Torah b'shivim loshin. The fact that Moshe articulated it to them, explained it to them, gave them the Torah in 70 languages, unochmer. And furthermore, from them tzivui, v'kosafto al ha'avonim goymer ba'ir heita ba'in loshen. This was actually a command that he instructed them, that you shall write on the stones, etc. A very well explained, which means 70 languages. Is muchach, it's evident, as is though in them amayla v'teyelis, that there is a benefit, there is an advantage in articulating the Torah. There's a maila and a benefit to Elis in doing so. And v'zokmen, so how can we say, as the tirgum the loshen yivonis, that translating it into Greek is goran inyan kosher, that this is something very difficult. Kosher b'yosef, very difficult. We're equating it to the day that they made the egel. Nochmer temua is der tam der fun. What's even more surprising is the reason why we're giving. Why is it difficult? It says because the Torah could not be fully translated as all of its need of the translation. We couldn't do it. So what does it mean that it could not be translated? Bald as the Torah is doch schon von früher übergesetzt geworden in alle Shivim Loshen. The Torah had already been previously translated in all 70 languages, Kinal, as we said before. So why was it? Why do we say that you could not completely translate it? The Rebbe Dor discusses over here that we're not talking only a part of the Torah. It's mashma that the entire Torah, just like by Talmud, the entire Torah, because according to some commentaries, the translation were only on certain parts, and maybe those parts, other parts that the Talmud asked them were not translated. But the Rebbe says in Pashtus, and the Rebbe brings down the sources that all of the Torah was already translated. So what was it so difficult that they found in translating the Torah? You can't fully translate it. Well, maybe there's a specific difficulty with the Greek language, but the Rebbe says we can't say that for many reasons. That maybe the difficulty has to do with Yevonis. And it's difficult to say, as in Mesechet Sofrim werd gemeint an inyan kosher, that what is meant, Mesechet Sofrim, when we're talking about difficulty, was is verbunden mit dem Targum of Loshen Yevonis. That's associated, that's tied, connected specifically with only with that Targum of Yevonis, or not with the andere von the Shivim Loshen, maybe not with the other 70 languages. And maybe that's why it was kosher only there. That's different than the Bayit Hate of all the other languages. But the Rebbe says this is very difficult to say, Barum, because the Rebbe brings 4 points here. Number one, Aleph, the Shivim Loshen in Belcha, the Torah is shown Spanish geworden. The 70 languages that the Torah has already been articulated, explained, that also includes Yevonis. So we see that the Torah could be translated fully because one of the 70 languages was Yevonis. And on the other hand, the Gemara doesn't seem to say that only Yevonis cannot be translated. It seems any Targum cannot be translated. Based from Stimas Haloshin and Mesechus Sofrim, from the closed language, from the general language in Mesechus Sofrim, it says, the Torah cannot be translated. It's not unique or Greek. It says the Torah cannot be translated. Is mashma over there? It appears those was the Torah cannot metargim werden called tzorko. That the fact that the Torah cannot be fully translated, that means any translation. So it's not unique to Greek. So you can't answer that there's something problem with Talmud, with Greek, with Yevonis, because it seems in the Gemara that the problem in Masechta Sofrim was with all languages. So, but we already know that all languages were interpreted or explained the Torah by it Hatem, by Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Tzivui by the Gilgal. Gimel, the Rebbe says, in the contrary, Yevonis has more connection to the Torah. It's easier than any of the other languages. We find elsewhere, as Loshen Yevonis hot in them goramayla legabe shar halashonis, that the Greek language actually has an advantage relative to the other languages. Because according to the view of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, the halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Darf men schreiben the Sefer Devarim, that you have to write, when you write a Sefer Torah or a Novi or Kesuvim, nor b'Loshen HaKodesh, you can only write in Loshen Kodesh, nitin kein ander Loshen, not in any other language, chutz from Yevonis, with the exception of Greek. Greek, you're allowed to write. You can write a Sefer Torah in Yevonis. So you see, actually, Yevonis is better than all the other languages. So why did they have such a problem? Dalet Nochmer. There's even more than that. State in Yerushalmi. It states in Yerushalmi, Botku Motzu. They searched and they found She'ein HaTorah Yochel Targim Kol Tzorko El Yevonis, that the Torah cannot fully be translated but in Greek. So Greek could translate the Torah. So why is it about here? But the Rebbe says, okay, what's the problem? That's okay, that's a small problem. But the main problem is, why is it as severe as the day of the Egel? What's so hard about translating the Torah into Greek, like making an Egel? That seems to be a little bit far-fetched. The Iker Tumiyah, the main surprise is in them, is the fact was the Braisa Hanal in Mesechta Sofrim Zok, that the above mentioned Braisa in Mesechta Sofrim says, that's surprising, the statement. The statement that it says there is, V'hoyo hayoim kosher Yisrael, that day was difficult for the Yidden, to yoim shenasa ha'egel, as the day the Egel was made. Wie is shaykh zu sagen, how could we possibly say, as zu libdem was the Torah kennit meturgum werden kol tzorka, that because the Torah cannot be fully translated as needed, is dosoifazofel kosher v'shlili. This is so difficult. This is such a negative thing. Bidos is bedoimes, so that this is similar to them togun zman, to the day and the time for Nasiyas Egel, when they made the Egel. Is there such a severity, such a severe matter in translating the Torah into Greek? Okay, you can't fully translate it, but so why is it like making day? In Ois Beis, the Rebbe brings that a similar loshon is also found. The Gemara brings down Masechta Shabbos, where the Gemara there too says that it's like the day that the Egel was made, and that's when Beis Shammai were overriding and had more of the Talmid, and the halacha remained like Beis Shammai against Beis Hillel. And the Gemara also says there, so we have a similar question over there. What is it so difficult, like the day that the Egel was made? What is meant over there? The Loshen Hanal, Ki Yom Shenasa HaEgel, the above mentioned language, like the Egel was made. Gefin mir euch in Mesechus Shabbos. We also find it in Tractate Shabbos. Over there, the Gemara says, as Oisa Hayoim, on that day when Rabu Beis Shammai, when the halacha remained like Beis Shammai, that on that day, Oya Hillel Kofu v'Yoshev Lifnei Shammai, Hillel was subdued and he was sitting in front of Shammai, Ke'echad Minat Talmidim, like one of the students. And the Gemara says over there, V'hoya kosher liYisrael ki yom shenasa boi ha'egel. And that was difficult for the Yidden, just like the day that the Egel was made. So, Eich Dorten for der Tzirbi, also there in the Gemara, it requires explanation. Parvos Oisa Hayoim, why is it that that day is given as Zoy kosher liYisrael? Was it so difficult for the Yidden? These two vergleichen, to the extent that we compare it zum Yom Shenase Egel, to the day that the day Egel was made. Rashi is mefarish kosher. Why was it difficult? So Rashi says Lifi Hillel Nosi, because Hillel was a prince, he was the leader, and also Ba'anvinsnon, and he was a humble person. That's why it was hard. So the Rebbe asks, okay, maybe because he was a leader and he had to be subdued in front of Shammai, who was only the Av Beis Din, and he was the Nasi was Hillel, and he was subdued to him. That's difficult. But the fact that he's humble, what does that mean? How does that connect to the kosher? The contrary, because he was an Anvin's son, so it didn't matter so much to him. Isn't it move on? Rashi says, L'choire is not that erste prat, it would seem that only the first detail, the fi shehilel nosi, the first detail, because Hillel was a leader, the prince. Atam farvos dos is given kosher, that seems to be the reason why it was difficult. Azayin dikanosi, that the fact that he was a nosi. So Hillel Zayin Kofu v'Yoshev Lifnei Shammai Ke'echad Min HaTalmidim, that he should be bent, sitting in front of Shammai as one of the students. We understand that detail that Rashi says Lefish Hillel Nossi. But the second detail that Rashi says is doch Gor Adrabe. That seems to be on the contrary. Atam v'sibe v'yazoi Hillel mitzidoi. That seems to be a reason and a cause how Hillel, from his perspective, he was able to be subdued, etc. Even though he was the leader, but it is given an Amazon because he was a humble. So how come we're making it saying kosher because he was an Amazon? So Rashi, the Rebbe brings down some people say Bazogan them Pirush in Rashi. They say the interpretation. It's in Rashi or not. I mean, they don't say directly on Rashi, but it's understood in Rashi that Lifi Shabbatu Behilel Shahoyo Nosi Va'anveson, because they kicked, they degraded Hillel. Hillel was a prince and humble. That was his greatness, and they banged at Hillel. They were disrespectful. And that was the difficulty. So the Nosi Anderson is describing Hillel's status, that he was a great prince. He was also a humble person. That's his greatness. And they disrespected him. That also would explain the equation, how we equate this to the day the Egel was made. Also, then was Shabbatu b'Moshe Shahoyu Nosi v'Onav. They kicked, they degraded Nosi. He was also leading Onav. They didn't want to wait for Moshe. Let us make a god, the Egel that'll go before us, and they rejected Moshe's leadership. So that would be a similarity, and maybe that's why it says but that's not sufficient. The Rebbe said that is not sufficient. This is seemingly not sufficient. Even once we try to equate that the fact that they disrespect to Hillel was this disrespect to Moshe, is doch aber die Nekuda Sachoimer von Yom Shnase Boy Ha'egel. What is the point of the severity when we talk about making the Egel? This is not about the disrespect to Moshe. It's not about the disrespect to Hillel. Making the Egel means what? We're not discussing here. No, it's a very serious offense that they rejected Moshe Rabbeinu. They were disrespect to Moshe Rabbeinu. What was it? We're talking about, God forbid, a sin of Avodah Zorah. Why are we equating the disrespect to Hillel to the disrespect to Moshe? But that's okay. But over here, Egel is already Avodah Zorah. That's a whole nother category by itself. Why do we want to equate it to the Avodah Zorah? We're not equating it what happened over there, that they were disrespectful to Moshe Rabbeinu too. And the Rebbe wants to explain here that the key is the Yom Shenase Egel, not the Egel itself. And there's a problem with that day. So it's actually, we're not trying to compare it to worship of Avodah Zorah, but we're trying to equate it to the problem that can come out from the day the Egel was made. It wasn't Avodah Zorah yet. They had chance to go ahead and serve Hashem, Chag Lashem Mochor. He was hoping that it'll be for Hashem and not for Avodah Zorah. But that day led to later on these results, and that's the difficulty. Gimel. So we can say the explanation in this. By prefacing the precise language to the language used in both of these statements in Masechta Sofrim, talking about the translation of Talmud HaMelech, and in Masechta Shabbos, talking about Hillel sitting before Shammai. Over there in both places, it says, Ki yoim shenase bo ha'egel, like the day the egel was made. Unit kasiyas egel. It doesn't say like making the egel or the kicheta egel, like the sin of the egel kiyotzebe. This is something else is meant by it. And the Rebbe explains now. The pashtus is the yoim avodas ha'egel given lemocharas yoim asiyas ha'egel. Simply, the day that they worshipped the egel was the day after the day they made the egel. As biyoim on the day on the day, and after it was actually already made, the egel was made. But Aaron said, Chag LaHashem Mocher. The festival to Hashem will be the next day, tomorrow. His intent was to push them off. He was certain that Moshe will come and they will be serving the Eibishter, and they pushed it off to the next day. So, under Iker, Cheta Egel is given of Morgan. The main Chet of the Egel was a prohibition against making it, but the main thing was the worship of the Egel was the next day is given of Morgan. As the Pasuk says, Vayashkimu Mimocharos, Vayalo Oilis V'goymer, they got up on the next day early and they brought up the Oilis for the Egel. So therefore, when we say kosher, kosher, we say ki yoim shenase boy ha'egel. It's difficult as the day the egel was made the harbkeit kushi bashtet. That difficulty consists nit azoi in them etzem asiya from them egel. It's not even in making the egel. It's like the day making the egel itself has not yet fully gone towards Avodah Zarah. Because even after they made the egel, it could have been the Aaron had gesagt. Aaron said, Chag LaHashem Mocher Yavdos HaMokim. It'll be a festival for Hashem that tomorrow we will serve the Eibishter. So it's not so much even in making the egel, even without worshiping the egel, nor in them was thus is yoim shenase boy ha'egel. It's a day that the egel was made. It's the day. What is the day? Atog verbunden normit in egel. It's a day which is associated only with the egel, nit in yone hamokim, and not with matters of Hashem. The day, because it was a day which was not associated with the Eibishter, just the egel, that eventually brought that the next day they did the egel. B'meila is that Atog von achona to the mcheit for the medina and the egel achazman. So it becomes a day of preparation to this sin of worshiping the egel after some time, which is at morning on the next day. That's the difficulty of that year. And the Rebbe explains the same thing is with Talmud. It couldn't be translated because they had to change around. Couldn't translate properly. Yes, you could translate it to the Greek. It was translated. But they couldn't translate it for Talmud properly because he would not understand it. And as the Gemara says, they needed to change some things in the Torah. And that's why it was difficult. It was difficult because from this, had they not changed it from the translation that you really need to translate it literally or word for word without changing some of the order that they did, then it would come to negative results, like the Yom Shenas Ba'egel, that from this will result negative in the future. Al derech zeh is benegeya zum Targum HaTorah. Similar, it's also to the Targum of the Torah. Shekosvu letalmei hamelech es haTorah Yevonis. They had written to King Talmai the Torah in Greek. What was that? Pirush Mesechta Sofrim. What does it mean? The Torah could not be translated fully. Not only in Greek, Torah cannot be translated fully, because if you translate it literally and you don't change things around, it could come to mistakes. That means a precise, exact translation, word for word. Und in dem Seder Mukdam U'Muchar, and to put the order, what's first and later in the Torah, just to do it the same thing in Greek. As it is stated in the Torah in the Lashon HaKodesh, in the Holy Tongue. Torah cannot be translated. It's not that the Torah cannot be translated, because there will be mistakes. When the chesorin b'shteit in them, what is the problem? What is the lacking? Consists in them was das gibt an Ort, because that gives space, that allows for. As von dem soll können that from that literal translation you can come out later on the noch hatos a mistake, etc. B'shas hagoy. When we have a goy like King Talmai, that noch dem lernen the Torah in Loshen Yovin. Later on, he will study the Torah in Greek. This is meturgam bediuk called tzorko, as it is translated precisely, as fully, word for word, all of its need is meglach. Then it's possible soll nicht verstehen dem richtigen Pirush, that he will not understand the correct meaning in many places in the Torah. Unochmer, not only won't he fully understand, he'll get the wrong. Verstehen, heipach von der Kavona mitzvos. He will understand opposite of the true intent of the pasuk. The fargifinim, that's what we actually find. As bishas the ayin beis zikanim. And later on, we have the story. The Masechta Sofrim talks about the 5 Zikanim. The Gemara has brought down that the 72 Zikanim haben metargi given the Torah Talmei HaMelech. They translated the Torah for King Talmai. Is Nosna Kodesh Baruch Hu believe kol echad ve'echad eit. So they wish to put in each one's heart the advice. Is kimu kulam l'dei achas. They all agreed to one translation. And they changed 13 matters, they changed it. But nit metargim the Torah called Tzorka. That means the Taka did not translate the Torah fully, meaning not word for word. So now we understand why it was difficult. This consists the comparison in the Masechta Sofrim, V'hoyo hayoim kosher Yisrael, Yom shenase ba'egel. That day was difficult for the Yidden, just like the day that the egel was made. Yishem v'der yom shenase ba'egel is given kosher, just as the day the egel was made. It was difficult. Why was it difficult? By let is given the hachona, because that was the preparation as l'mocharosei. That the next day is the din and the egel. That next day from this came out serving of the egel. Al derech zeh is the yoim was metargim given the Torah liyivonis. The same thing is the day that they did translate the Torah to Greek, precisely word for word. Ayim kosher Yisrael. That was hard for you. But those can bring in to Pirush HaTorah, like the boy. This could lead and bring one to interpreting the Torah not properly. When Hepach and opposite the intention Kenala said before that when the 72 sages translated, they changed it around. And the Rebbe wants to explain it, and I say this is similarly also what took place with Beis Shammai. Similar to this, we can say about the day Hillel Kafu v'Yoshev Shammai, that Hillel was bent and sitting before Shammai. Das allein was man demol geiser given wie das Shammai is nicht as a kosher. The fact alone that you made the decree that Shammai was the one that won and the halacha became like him, that's not so kosher. Nicht as a kosher, not so difficult. Warum soif, because at the end is doch shosik le Hillel Shammai. Hillel was silent to Shammai. He agreed to Shammai. He did not stand in his disagreement. So, which means he agreed to Shammai. Those says that Inyan is given al pi halacha. That means that mattered, that the ruling was like Shammai was according to halacha, because even Hillel did not object to it. So, what is the kosher? The Iker Kushi Shabazeh is Bashtan, and the main difficulty consisted in them, or those what can bringen, this could lead, as euch später, that also later, pasken the halachas give Shammai, you might come to rule the halachas later on like Bishamai. Hepech klole halacha visi is ledoira, but this would be contrary to the rules of the halacha as it is for generations, as Beis Shammai b'mokim Beis Hillel in a Mishnah, that Beis Shammai in the place of Beis Hillel is not a Mishnah. We don't consider it even as a Mishnah because Beis Hillel is absolutely right. But by seeing that one time Beis Hillel was kofed Beis Shammai, you might lead you. It's kosher like the Yom Asa Egel that leads to a negative thing. And the Rebbe explains now that's why Rashi brings down the two in Yonim, because the fact that Hillel was a Nossi and an Anvins, those are the reasons why the halacha is like Beis Hillel. First of all, he's a Nossi. And the other thing is, the Gemara says, why is the halacha like Beis Hillel against Beis Shammai? Because the Hoyunoichim Va'aluvim, they were more pleasant and they were more humble and they were more accepting degradation. So that humility. So Rashi is basically saying Yoim that couldn't come out because this was Hillel who was kosher because Hillel was a Nasi and the halacha is like him, and he's also understood. That's why the halacha is like him. And yet this can lead to sometimes people coming at other conclusions because on that particular day he was sitting in front of Beis Shammai. Ados is the kavona from Pirush Rashi, that this is the intent of Rashi's explanation. The fish Hillel Nasi v'anvenson. Rashi is masbir dem inyan hakoishi shebazeh. Rashi explains what's the difficulty. Halacha ki Hillel, Beis Hillel. Why is the halacha like Hillel? Beis Hillel is mitzad the tzvei tchunas. That is because of the two characteristics. First of all, Nasi. He's the non-leader, and also humility. Der moire halacha bechlal, who is the one that teaches the halacha in general, is der Nasi. The Nasi teaches the halacha afilu legabe dem av bezdin, even next to the av bezdin. But in this case, Shammai, who was the av bezdin, he is the one that led the halacha against Hillel. Und da ist gewen verkehrt, Shammai ist doch gewen der av bezdin. And he is the one that gave the halacha, and Hillel listened to him. That's one problem. When the Anvenson, he was also the Anvenson. The halacha is like him, but the Gemara is zokt. The Gemara says, "Legabe in Eruvin, legabe Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel bechlal." The Gemara discusses the Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel in general as mipnei ma zochu Beis Hillel likvoy halacha k'moisam. Why were the Beis Hillel merited the halacha should be set like them? If they were more easygoing, more pleasant, and they were more accepted their shame, and that another that was their characteristic, and the halacha should be because of that. But because of that day, this could become a mistake. So we explained now, actually, that it's not the Avodah Zorah, it's the Yoim that could lead. That's how we explained both the Greek translation could lead to mistakes. Hillel's sitting in front of Beis Shammai could lead to mistakes later on. But still, the Rebbe says there needs to be also a connection to the actual Egel itself, somehow in some stretch also connected to the Avodah Zorah that they did following when the day that they made the Egel. Both. All aspects of Torah are totally precise. His movement is understood as der Vergleich von die zwei Inyonim. That when we compare these two matters, Targum HaTorah LeTalmai HaMelech, the translation of the Torah to King Talmai, and also Noisa Yom Hoya Hillel Kafufulu, and that day Hillel was bent, that we compare these two matters to them Yom Shenase Boha Egel, to the day that the Egel was made. Is nit nor in them was their tog. It's not just in the fact that this day can goydem sein an Indian or this day can cause a matter or a happening, something which is undesirable, with the Yom Shenase Boha Egel, as the day that the Egel was made, that it caused later on the actual Egel. It's more than that. Is nit nor in der wieder nor euch mit sadem teuchen bei Yom Shenase Boha Egel. It is also the idea of the Egel. The Egel was made there. Und Chet Egel Bechlal, and generally the sin of the Egel. That's what it was. So first the Rebbe explains what is really the sin of the Egel. It's not like they just wanted to go against Hashem, against Moshe. They thought that an intermediary was something which was necessary, which Hashem wanted. That's Borobah. So you do of us the Meforshi HaTorah Zayin and Meidir. It's known that the commentaries of the Torah, they explain at length the Negeya the Minyan from Asiyas Egel, as it relates to the idea of making the Egel. As Iden haben nicht gemont an Inyan von Avodah Zorah Chas V'Sholem, that the Jews were not demanding a matter of idol worship, Avodah Zorah, God forbid. Nor b'loi zamanig volzo zefirim b'mkoy Moshe. They wanted somebody to lead them in Moshe's place, b'loi b'mkoy Hashem, not in Hashem's place. Ukita'anosim, as the argument, as the pasuk quotes in B'Shoina Kosuk, because this man Moshe, who has brought us up from Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Thus haste, what does it mean? They wanted it should be an intermediary between Hashem and them. And that was based because that's what Hashem had the whole time. He had a Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem didn't lead him himself. It was based if them was that was based on that was the way Hashem set it up himself. L'chayre would seem Moshe ish asher elonu meretz Mitzrayim, was Moshe the man that brought us from the land of Egypt. Nit der Eibishter allein, not Hashem himself. Nor durch Moshe als memutza, but it was through Moshe as an intermediary zwischen dem Eibishter and Yidden, between Hashem and the Yidden. The reason is, logically, is kidei ayi do lemato, so that a Jew here below, so Zayin verbunden mit dem Eibishter, should be tied to Hashem, unindin and ves darf zu sein, and to serve him properly as he should. With all powers of the soul, and also with his intellect and with his feelings. We want the Jew to reach that level. He has to have an example. He has to have a physical someone over here that he can relate to have it comprehended, and he needs a Moshe Rabbeinu for that. Is as venelakus vet nimshach kaviyochel So when can you serve Hashem with everything? Is when you have godliness below. Until you can know that there is a God over there. Wissen, in other words, you need to know, which is in addition that we have to believe in Hashem, you want it to come down also in the knowledge that there is a God. So you believe in Hashem. This is a belief in the highest of levels. But this is that's the level of godliness, which is on its own at the highest level. Simple in total simplicity, you can only approach it and you only get it through Amunah. That's Lahamin. But we need to also have Leida. So, godliness becomes revealed to a person below, on neshama beguf, a soul and a body, unislabish oy, and it dresses up in him. But and this wondrous fusion, unity between the neshama and the guf. These bedugmas Moshe, to the extent that in a way of Moshe was Ish Holikim, he was a godly man. Ish was Mikenem Zenon Heron, but he was a man that you can see and hear. That was the Mamutza. The Mamutza was in order to bring it down into some sort of a reality. Okay, in order for godliness to be further drawn down and sensed in the world, in this physical world of Bechol and Yom and all matters, they were of the opinion, they thought, that it needs to be drawn down through a lower level step in this world. That way it will have more impact and in the world by making that intermediary even more lower than Moshe Rabbeinu. That this was actually the way it was later on, as the Rebbe stood Gehasen, Hashem instructed, made me a mikdash from gold and silver, I will rest amongst you. What is the main part of the mikdash where Hashem rested? Is that that was the ark with the two cherubs. That's the way the resting of the divine came amongst you. They came down through physicality, to the Zov and the Kesses, to the Kruvim. As the Pasuk says, I will talk to you from on top of the lid, the Kapoides, from in between the two cherubs. Asher al Aron Ha'edus, that's on the Aron Ha'edus. Yeshloimar, the Rebbe says, as this is the Hasbora Samavur in the Medrash, this is the explanation which is articulated in the Medrash. How did the sin of the eagle come? Because of this was Bishas Matan Torah at the time the Torah was given. When Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, the Hashem descended on Mount Sinai, haben die Eden gesehen, the Yidden saw with the Eberster is Yored mit der Merkava. They saw Hashem descending with the chariot. Und sie haben Shoymet given Echad mehem, and they slipped one of them, the face of the ox of the Merkava. That's what that's how the Chet Egel came about, that they took that Pnei Shoyr of the Merkava. That's the calf, that's the Egel. Which means they wanted here below, something from below, bedugmas vilamailo, is those Merkava Yoina similar to above, it's the supreme chariot. And even actually they made the eagle. Before they worshipped it, so in other words, could have still turned around. He says that festival for Hashem to my next day. As from them can you can come out an advantage. As when Moshe vet kumen, when Moshe will come, vet by Eden is Galavern, then the Eden will reveal that the Inyan Egel is kemetziasnit, that the whole Egel is not really in existence. The Pashtus, literally, what would happen? When es wird nicht gewende vayashkimu, had they not got up early, which asotum zirzon kadesh yachto. The reason they got up early is the Satan encouraged them to get up, so they sin. Wird nicht gewen der vayachto, they wouldn't do the sin. Nor adrabe. Moshe will verbrennt dem Egel b'maimed v'heskem kol b'nei Yisrael. Moshe would have burnt the calf in this standing and the agreement of all the b'nei Yisrael. Upshita as a vote matchatchila did given avedus Egel, and obviously would never worship the Egel. Unes wird sich ausdrücken achdus havai noch mehr. That would express the unity of Hashem even more. As einoid movati, there's nothing besides Hashem. Unaz amemutza can sein, and who can serve as an intermediary? Nor Moshe memutza mechaber. Only Moshe, an intermediary that connects, was der Eibishter geschickt, which Hashem sent, und gemacht for sein Shliach zu Eden, and made him as his agent to the Eden. So that means that in of itself wasn't such a terrible thing in the making when they did it what they wanted to do, and it could have turned out okay. The poil is over from them. In actuality, what branched out happened with it by many Yidden, like Morgan. The Chet Egel was the sin of the golden calf. The Chet from Avodah Zorah, the sin from Avodah Zorah, Hepech Achdus Hashem, the opposite of the unity of Hashem. The Rebbe continues in Ois Zayin to point out that this same idea that took place by the Egel, this is actually the day that the Egel was made. We're not talking about the actual Avodah Zorah, but the allowance that there is something else besides Hashem is what leads or could lead eventually, not the worshiping, the actual worshiping, but just the fact that an Egel was made brings about to later on of the actual Avodah Zorah, Zayin. Und das ist der Inyan von Kosher in Yom Shenase Boi HaEgel. This is the difficulty which is in the day that the Egel was made. Nicht der Yom She'ovdu es Egel, not the day that they served the Egel, but they worshipped it, but when they made it. The etzem zachas is overn an obgetelte metzias. The idea itself, just the thing itself, that there should be a separate entity. Even if you are thinking that through this you want to bring down godliness, as we said before, they wanted to bring down the godliness through the ego. The baldos is nit mitzad tzivu Hashem, since it's not based on the command, the instruction of Hashem, which also is loshen tzavsa v'chibur, connecting together with Hashem. Ken der fun nistar werden der chet avodah zorah. From that can branch out later on the sin of avodah zorah. An inyan fun shtei reshuyos, the concept, the idea of the two domains. There is Hashem's domain and avodah zorah. That is when it does not come by the command of Hashem. That's when you, the Yidden, are making a memutza and egel. But Moshe Rabbeinu, which Hashem's command, Masha'en came in the skum mitzad hatzivui, when it's coming because of the command. The kruvim, the mishkan, Aderech v'dos is given in the mishkan, Orin kruvim canal. Similar was the mishkan, the ark and the cherubs. The Dvar Hashem came, the Aditi Alech of the Bartchana Allah Kapoyer, the Evishan speaks from the kruvim, the kesef v'zov. Hetzich demult on blois. Then you don't sense an interest, a separate entity. All what you sense there, as durch them gate durch den Dvar Hashem. The word of Hashem passes through them. They're not an entity. It just goes through them. There is no entity And there's no aspect, there's nothing of value in the item itself. Ubemela, and therefore, from that will not come out a mistake, the state of two domains, God forbid. Das ist der Teuchen HaMedrash Kinal. This is the meaning, the idea of the Medrash, as we said before, brother, that Egel is Nishmat geworden von dem Pnei Shoir Shem Merkava. The calf that they made, that the Yidden made, it sort of slipped away from the face of the ox that's in the chariot that they experienced by Matan Torah. They wanted to have a slip away, meaning it's similar to what they envisioned above, they wanted it below. Vidos is lamailo, that's what they saw the way it's above. When it is above, is those Chelek von der Merkava Elyono, but above it is part of the chariot, the supreme chariot, Hashem's chariot. It's Kedusha. Das Inyan von Elokus, it's a aspect of godliness. Und is Megala Elokus, and it reveals godliness. Shas ober dos vert nishmat, but when it slips, Mazunder, it becomes separated. Lamat and below, nit ve'acheli from the Merkava, not as part of the chariot. As herzich nit in them bitl hamerkava l'rechel. You don't sense in it the subjugation of the carriage to the one who's riding on it. It's a separate entity. It slipped away. Then from that, it can develop, it can come out of there, the sin of the egel, the sin of Edazor. That's the way we can understand the kosher, the day that the egel was made. There is an entity is made independent, not as a connected atzivui, connected to Hashem, tzavsu v'chibur to Hashem. Then it can be an Avodah Zarah. And now the Rebbe explains this is also the explanation in the Targum why it's kosher. Also along these lines. Similar to this is as it connects to the translating of the Torah into the Greek. Shakosvu leTalmai HaMelech, that they wrote to King Talmai, that day was also difficult for the Yidden, just as the day that they made the Egel. Targum HaTorah al Yidei Moshe b'Shivim Loshen. When Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah into 70 language, or the Derkim Atzivu, or when they observed the command, the Chosafta Lavonim, as called Divrei HaTorah Azois Bayit Hate, to write all these words, good explanation, B'Shivim Loshen, which is all in 70 languages. The Bald das is given zusammen mit Torah, wie sie ist b'mekoyre b'loshen HaKodesh, since it was together with the Torah as it is in the source of Loshen HaKodesh, und sie ist gekommen al pi hatzivu, and that came by the instruction of Hashem, hat es kein Ort nicht gegeben, then it did not allow for, as mizom mefarer sein, the Torah shaloi kefi hakavona, that you shall explain the Torah not the way it is intended, by the true intention. While in the Aled Ayin Lishoinus hat sich angehört der Tzivur, because in all of the 70 languages, you were able to sense the command. Und die Gedushas HaTorah, and the sanctity of the Torah, vizi is b'Lashoin HaKodesh, as it is in the holy tongue. V'nemra mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it was said from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In all languages, that was transmitted into them, that holiness, and nothing could be interpreted incorrectly. But when they translated the Torah by the demands of King Talmai, not by the instructions of Hashem, in Lashon Yavin to the Greek language. But from them, then from this you can come out from this an inyan shaloki deboyu, something which is not proper, something undesirable. Anstot, as we see from the corrections, Ashtot as in Breishis bara Elikim. You read in the first pasuk that in the beginning Elikim created. You can translate it Zolman Lernen, Achdus Hashem, and that would tell us about the unity of Hashem. Hashem created everything. Devarim is, which the truth is, you may instead of that learn that Mentaichna state is saying. Some can translate that there is two domains, and this the domain which is Breishi created Elikim. Rishon Boras Hasheni. In the andere psukim the Torah, in the other verses of the Torah, the 13 changes that they made, Sheshinu l'Talmud HaMelech, which they changed for King Talmud, was in the Rubam hat gekent sein an esinas mokim zu a pirush. In most of them, the meaning could have been, if they were translated it literally, there could be room, there would be an opportunity to explain something contrary to the Torah. Was bringt is heipech achdus Hashem und heipech HaTorah, that would bring out the opposite of Hashem's unity and opposite of the Torah. So that's the idea that once you are the ones, just like the Egel, the Yidden want to make it, that's problematic. Talmud wants you to translate the Torah. That's problematic. The Kruvim that come from Hashem, the translation that come from Hashem, that's good. That has Kedusha in it. But when it comes on their own, that's where the problem starts. Yishem Gedosi has been negayat to Yoim Shenase Boy Ha'egel. Just as we find this in the day that the Egel was created, that there was an opportunity. The Yidden made another Rishus, Avodah Zorah Chas v'Sholom, from it, because it was an entity over there that they gave. Eventually, it led to independent Ashtei Rishuyos Chas v'Sholom. Ubedakis Yoisid and Targum HaTorah Yivonis, and a little bit on a more refined level, translating the Torah to Greek also gives the opportunity, so to speak, to misinterpret the Torah and teach against the Torah, against the unity of Hashem. But al derech zeh is das noch mer bedakus, so even in a refined, in a more delicate way, it's also in Torah itself. V'negeya de machloikas Shammai v'Hillel, the disagreement of Shammai Hillel, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Says Yedua, it's known as Shammai, Beis Shammai is Shorshoi and Midas HaGevura. That Shammai and the house of Shammai, the school of Shammai, his root comes from the measure of Gevura, din, judgment. Un Hillel, Beis Hillel, is Midas HaChesed. They come from the measure of kindness and compassion, Rachamim. Underfar, and because of that, is Bechlal generally Beis Shammai L'chumra, because their Gevura din, they are more stringent. Beis Hillel L'kula, Beis Hillel is lenient, because that's Chesed Arach. Der Chiluk zwischen Midas Hadin and Midas HaChesed Arachamim, the difference between the approach of the measure of judgment on one hand and the measure of kindness and compassion on the other hand, is bedugma verzoked in Medrash that's similar to what he says in the Medrash, vegni chesed ve'emes, about the two characteristic of kindness and truth. Shem asked them about creating the world. Chesed Omar Yibore. Chesed said, let it be built. The Emes Omar Al Yibore. Emes says, don't create the world. Thus haste. What it means. The mitzad midas adin is nito kein ort welt. That from the perspective of the measure of judgment, there is no space for the world. There's no room for the world. Masha enkein mitzad midas arachamim. As opposed to from the perspective of the measure of compassion, there is room for the world. Yivora, chesed omer yivora. La'acharei, that is in the beginning, to create or not. How does it express itself once it was created? La'acharei briyos ha'olam. After the creation of the world, from this comes out, as mitzad midas adin herzich on der bittel und die shvira Welt. That from this perspective of the measure of judgment, you sense the negation and the breaking of the world. Midas hachesed v'arachamim, but the measure of kindness and compassion is in Yonah. Its matter is adrabah, not to break the world, but on the contrary, to mamshich zayin elakusim Welt, to draw down godliness into the world. That's the difference between the measure of Beis Shammai and the measure of Beis Hillel, the measure of Gevura and the measure of Chesed and Racham. From them is verstanding der Chilik ba'oimek yoser. From this we is also understood the distinction even deeper betoichen ha'inyonim, in the contents of these matters, midas ha'gevura u'midas ha'chesed, between the measure of Gevura and the measure of chesed. Mitzad midas hadin, from the perspective of the measure of judgment, herzich on the Welt is azach. Over there, you sense the world is an entity. Obgetelt pargashosei fun elokus. It is separated by its feeling of self from godliness. So it feels itself, so it's separated. Was der Riber. Darf sein die Avodah. Therefore, the work is, what is the service, therefore? Und der Seder, the order is von Shvira und Bittel, to break and negate, because there is a sense of self from the perspective of Midas Adin. Umitzad Midas HaChesed, but from the perspective of the measure of kindness, was means Mamshich Elakusin Welt, in which we drawing down godliness into the world. Der Herd verkehrt, then you sense just the opposite. As Welt is bekoyach, that world is either potentially, at least potentially, we have to work on it. It's not separate, it is one, it's united with godliness. The far darfmen ton und öfton in Welt. That's what you must do and accomplish in the world. The Galazain in Iralakus, to reveal in the world godliness. That's the approach. Beis Shammai says, break bittel of the world. Beis Hillel says, be mamshich and reveal godliness in the world. When you got two possibilities. See machmir zayin, oder mekel zayin. Should we be stringent or be lenient? Generally, is Beis Shammai lechumra. So Beis Shammai goes stringent. Obscheiden sich von Inyonim from Welt. He would say, separate yourself from matters of the world. Don't separate chumra. Beis Hillel lekula. Beis Hillel is lenient. Mevarer zayin umezachich zayin chelek ba'olam, to sort out and to refine your portion of the world. But the dakas come to. So when you go with it in the refined and of the refined level, what the results of it, as mitzad midas adin, that from the measure of judgment can arush kumen beishtalshus through evolution and atnua from shtei reshuyos kaviyachol, that there could be a movement from two domains, so to speak. Madaf mitim lechomov, and you need to fight against it because there is opportunity for something else. The baldas the mitzias from Welt is menit miyachid mitalakus, because you don't unite the existence of the world with godliness. It's still separate. But from the perspective of the measure of kindness and compassion, Beis Hillel, Herzich on Achdus Hashem B'Shleimus. Over there you hear the unity of Hashem B'Shleimus, that in the world there is a revelation of godliness. Und das ist der Vergleich, and this is the comparison from Oisa Hayoim, or Yehillel Kofu V'Yoshev Lifnei Shammai, that on that day, when the majority of Beishamai ruled, so Hillel was bent and sitting in front of Shammai Ke'echad Talmidim, like one of the students. Or Yekosher Yisrael Kiyem Shenaseh B'Hegel. It was difficult, but the Yidden, like the day the Egel was made. The Balda as B'Yoim Zeh is given Halocha B'Das Shammai. Since on that day the ruling was like Shammai, these Gabrus for Midas Adin, of Midas HaChesed V'Rachamim, the overpowering of the measure of judgment over the measure of kindness and compassion. So we were worried as al Yidei Zeh, that through that one time happening, so während der Anhoge, the conduct may become V'Halocha as euch lahabo, that also in the future was vet b'hishtalshlus kenen geben an ort efshtei reshuyos, that it could be as it evolves to give space to say that there is two domains. The dakas, in a very refined way. You have to wage war and you have to negate it, but it still allows for another mitzias. That's the Yom Shenaseh Ba'egel, an opportunity for an entity for a mitzias. But what actually happened is different than what happened by the Egel, Yom Shenaseh Ba'egel, and what happened with Talmai and what happened with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. These are different. Dosis Obenor was the Tzveiteg, that these 2 days, the Yom Shekosvu the Talmai Hamelech as a Torah Yevonis, the day that they wrote to him the Torah in Greek, and the Yom Vasiloi Kof V'Yosh and Shammai, and the day that Hillel was sitting bent before Shammai, Zayin Kosher Kiyoim Shenasi B'Ha'egel, they're as difficult as the day that the Egel was made, to lead them Chashash, because of the worry, as his older Funa Roiskumen, that this will come out of this, the dakas in a refined way, Heper von Achdus Hashem, the opposite of the unity of Hashem. But what happened in actuality? The poil, in actuality, is Badem Targum HaTorah Liyivonis, the translation of the Torah to Greek, Ufadem Yom Shoya Hillel Kofen Yoshev Lifnei Shammai, and from the day that Hillel was bent and sitting before Shammai, Nita Roiz Gekumen Kain Inyan Hofri. Nothing of the opposite actually came out. Nit vi Badem Yom Asiyas Egel. Unlike when they made the Egel, over there it actually turned out to being an Egel. You can say more, not only did it not happen what happened by the Egel, but it happened what could have happened by the Egel. It could have been a benefit had the Yid not got up the next morning and worshipped him at his other. Just like in the day that the Egel was made. Tomorrow is going to be a festival for Hashem. Literally it means as that if you're going to utilize it, you're going to use it properly, and that it may come out of that an idea of a festival. When Yavdas HaKadosh Baruch Hu can only going to serve Hashem as it before. So that could have happened there, but that happened by the Targum HaTorah Livonis. From the Targum HaTorah Livonis, from the translation, the Torah to Greek came out better. B'shaz the ayin beis kenim of the Targum and the Torah the Talmei Hamelech nit kol tzorko. when they did translate it, they didn't do it all of its need as necessary. But still, what came out from that? So Meshanigim and Kama V'Kama Devarim, they changed many of the items. Onhibdik from the Elikim Bora Bereshis. They changed it as instead of Bereshis Bora Elikim, they wrote Elikim Bora Bereshis, anstatt Bereshis Bora Elikim. Is nicht nor Arab gekommen euch zu Umasoi, is nicht nor Arab gekommen euch zu Umasoilum Abdus Hashem, wie das wird gesagt beteure. So not only did it come down to the nations of the world, the unity of Hashem, as it's in the Torah, because they can read it from the Torah, it became a ruling as the einzige Sprach was bemek schreiben Svarim, that the only language which you are permitted to write Svarim, Sefer Torah, is B'Yivonis, is in Greek. Is kosher likris boy, and it's kosher to read in Greek. Metames Yadayim, the Gzeira for a Sefer Torah, that it's Metam Yadayim, just like a Sefer Torah which is written Lashon Kodesh v'chulu. The Shleimus Habirur for the Ksav v'Lashon Yivonis, the wholesome of the birur of this writing and the language of the Greek. The Rebbe in the notes discusses it's not just the writing; it's the language, both the writing and the language and the Greek and the translation. Similar, you can say with regards to that day that Hillel was bent and sitting before Shammai like one of the students. As nit nor is from them nitaris gekommen. Not only did it not result as all bleiben the doiris the halacha b'Shammai, that for generations to come the halacha should remain like Shammai be Shammai. No, does not gepoiled oik by Shammai. This actually impacted also Shammai be Shammai, an Inyan from Kfiyah ubitla, that also brought about a level of subduing, forced and subjugation. Yeshleimer, as the Fadis do kama mikoimis, say that's why there are many places with Bishamai Lekulo that Bishamai is linear. That comes as a result from the fact that Isa Hayyim, it didn't result, but it came about that the halacha remained ledoidus like Beis Hillel, and even Beis Shammai recognized that, and it impacted him that in some cases he's lekula too. Yudalef, Ibal das divrei tzadikim chayim v'kayomim la'ad. Since the words of the righteous are alive and exist forever, obefrat inyonim v'shtein in Torah shehi nitzchis, especially those matters which are written in the Torah, which is eternal, is der fun move on. So from this it's understood as oich dos was Aaron had gesagt, even that which Aaron said, Chag Lashem Mocher, there will be a Yom Tov the next day, and that was his Benegeya Yom Shivasar B'Tammuz, as it relates to the day Shivasar B'Tammuz, that the Zicher Mekuyim Garam. So this will certainly become fulfilled, that it will be actually a Yom Tov Shivasar B'Tammuz. And we are stated in Kisveh HaRizal, as it's written in the writings of the Arizal, Asoida Nirbas Moseh in Divrei Aaron, the secret that is hinted in Aaron's word, Chag L'Hashem Mocher, in Divrei Aaron is Osida Kodesh Baruch Hu Lahofchoi, that Hashem is destined to turn around Shivosah B'Tammuz, Chag L'Hashem Mocher. It'll become L'Yom Tov, it'll be a Yom Tov. And Nimtzok Chag L'Hashem Mocher Be'etzem. That actually, in essence, is going to be a Yom Tov. Not Mochor the next day on Shivos B'Tammuz when they worshipped the Egel and Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Luchas, but the Mochor Zel Lachar Zman Chulu, but that will be after a time. The Ashloimar, we can say as B'Pnimius is those der Chag. In the inner, this is the festival of Askumta Rois Al Yidei HaTshuva from Eden of Asiyas Egel. It's the Yom Tov that comes through the tshuva from the Yidden for making the Egel. That will be revealed in the future. That's why there will be a festival. Hashem's unity will come openly. Also, as it relates to the three impure klippas. Now we can't bring them in. They're klippas tamei, but also lovely. Even the sparks of the Gimel Klippas Atmeis as the Nitzutzis Shabahem. The sparks were in the Gimel Klippas Atmeis, which is the Tachlis to Pnimis HaKavana Shabahem, the ultimate goal and the inner intention, even the Klippas Atmeis, that turns to the good and is elevated to Kedusha through the Tshuva on the Chet HaEgel. And that's why there will be a festival, a Yom Tov from that Tshuva. Say similar is also with regard to the translating of the Torah in Shivim Loshen, in the 70 language, in this very late generation. Especially the Mayonis from Pnimiyas HaTorah, especially the well springs of the inner parts of Torah. For Yadu, as it's known, the Kved Kedushas Merichom Admur, that the Rebbe, my father-in-law, hat sich mishtadel given, put an effort at Mizom Metargim Zayin that you should translate Oir in Yonei Pnimius HaTorah, also the matters of the inner part of Torah B'Shivim Loshen in the 70 languages. Birday, in order as Oir Divos Hoben noch nit ken Sheiches zu lernen und verstehen L'Shen HaKodesh. Those who still have no connection, no ability to learn or to understand in Loshen HaKodesh. Or that Afili in Yiddish, they can't understand even Yiddish. So, to them as well, they should reach these well springs, the Pnimius HaTorah, the inner part of the Torah. Was durch them tut men oif, them biru from the Ayin Loshen. Through this, you accomplish the sorting out of the 70 languages. Nit nor v'zei zainen kolulu b'yachad mit Loshen HaKodesh. Not only as they're included and together with Loshen HaKodesh, when they were in this Chatchila Bayer Heitev, nor v'yeder steht b'fnei atzmei, but like each language stands on their own, like by Talmud. Was noch mehr is das durch Arobtrogen the Tife Nyonim v'Hesbedim, by bringing down the deep ideas and explanation from Achdus Hashem, of Hashem's unity, Shebetoros HaChasidus, that is found in the Hasidic teaching in Loshen Kolam Ba'am, in the language of all people. By from the Ayin Umas. Through this, for bringing down the Torah in their languages, you actually accomplish the sorting out of the 70 nations themselves. And das is Mekarev Umemahir Dem Kaosi Marda Malk Mishicha, that brings close and hastens the coming of the King Mashiach, and Mashiach will come. Was Oz Epical Amim Sofa Bruro. Then Hashem says, I will turn all the nation a very clear language. Likrei Kulam B'Shem Hashem. They'll all call the name of Hashem. Of the Shechem Echad, to work and serve Him together with one shoulder. Was Damul Betzayin that Yom Me'ilu. Then these days will be turned around with Sosenu, with Simcha, for happiness, for joy and happiness, for good festivals. Their siyum from the Yemei HaMetzorim, and the conclusion of the day of Metzorim of the 3 weeks was Chongeim Shivosu B'Tammuz, which started with the 17th of Tammuz. Tisha B'Av at Zayin Yom Tov Gadol. Tisha B'Av will be a big Yom Tov, the Korev Mamish, very soon, actually. Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Va'era, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Tovshin Mem, and the Rebbe brings down in the note that Rosh Chodesh Shvat is a Yoim Shebo Yehoyil Moshe Be'eres HaTorah B'Shivim Loshen. That's when he began to explain the Torah using the 70 languages. As the Pasuk says, and since this is on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh includes all the days of the month, including also the 10th of Shvat, which is the Yortzeit and the Lula, Stalkus, of the expansion of Moshe in our generation. The Rebbe, my father-in-law, he explained and translated also matters of the inner of Torah so that everybody can, in all languages, and as the Rebbe brought down at the end of the Sikha, and be because of Mames Bebias Mashiach Tzidkenu. The Rosh Chodesh Shvat is Tavshin Mem.